لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. This Juma coincides with the very sad and tragic assassination of Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayh, and it is in place to talk a little bit about this blessed man and this blessed Imam. There is no doubt that there was no one more right than Imam Ali to lead the community after the demise of the blessed Prophet. I'll continue from the discussions last night that when the Prophet left us, he left us delivering a message. He gave us the basics of how to lead a good human life. He introduced God at the helm of a Muslim community. He taught us how to embrace other monotheistic faiths. He left us with teachings how to deal with other people who are not strictly monotheistic by the Abrahamic standards, but still who believe in one God nonetheless and who are moral people. He created that space for us to live with them, collectively grow, benefit from each other's learnings. He gave us this flexibility. He gave us a moral compass, but that moral compass was based on the notion of God centricity and spiritually being inclined towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he did not live long enough to show us how to implement this sense of a righteous life within an expanding community. He left the message. After his demise came the biggest challenge as to how to understand the teachings of the Prophet, the teachings of the Quran, how to evaluate the conduct of the Prophet in a growing, expanding community. It is here that we find that there is a point of make or break. Either the people who come after the Blessed Prophet look at the newer challenges and understand very accurately how to deal with them, or they become worldly governors. And even though Khalifa Abu Bakr and Khalifa Umar were good people and they put many things right and they tried to do a lot of good, as stated by Imam Hussein salamullah alayhi in his letter to the people of Basra, I believe. And Khalifa Uthman was not a bad person inherently. He was a person who was unacquainted with the matters of government, and he was taken advantage of. But nonetheless, all three of them were political leaders of the community. Their understanding of a righteous community was one that grows, that prospers financially, one whose unity is kept intact by and large. Of course, that all fell apart in the Khilafah of Khalifa Uthman. But the thing is that they did not know the essence of the prophetic message. That essence was God's centricity, tending to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and rule of justice, equality, egalitarianism, all those lofty, noble ideals of the Quran and the Prophet, how to implement them. That required a leader that was endowed within the spiritual message of the Prophet and who was so righteous in his own conduct. These people, as good as they were no match for the challenges that would face the human community. Now look at the way when a leader sets a precedence, how things can go wrong after that. We, in Britain, we went to war with Iraq over 20 years ago, yes, or around there. We are still feeling the repercussions of that. It has set a precedent We have gone, encouraged others to invade various countries to have government changes of government. We have left those countries devastated, and we don't feel a sense of sin because a precedent was set and the rest of the leaders are following the same precedent. We went through Brexit. The whole country now is lamenting that it was a wrong decision. It has cost us around 140 billion. All the promises made by Boris Johnson, by Nigel Farage, were all lies, and people are seeing it. But nobody will talk about it, and the precedent is set. And we are set to lose so much more. By the way, on that note, as the Quran says, they are dismantling and destroying with their own hands what they created about the community in Medina. Now we are doing the same thing in Britain, but my point is not that. My point is that wrongful leadership, even though they are meaning well, if they are not accurate leadership, it can lead the community astray. Now, with a newly formed, fresh, godly community, if we get an administrator administrating the state and their whole outlook is to expand the community, to make it more affluent, and is not concerned about the precepts of justice, the rights of minorities, freedom of speech, of God centricity, of being God conscious, then such leadership is not the right leadership for a community that Muhammad Rasulullah leaves behind. And we find that the first 25 years after the demise of the Prophet caused the decline of the community, spiritual and moral decline of the community. The precept of justice, social equality, rights of others were totally removed from the community, to the extent that when Imam Ali Salamullah alayhi finally comes to the seat of Khilafah, you are seeing the audacity of the community in pledging allegiance to him and then breaking allegiance. You're talking about grand people like Talha and Zubair, who are the first converts. Talha is one of the only two people who the historians conclude upon who was with Prophet Muhammad at the time of the Battle of Uhud when the rest of the Muslims fled. The other one was Imam Ali, which we all agree upon. And the other one was Talha, a grand, renowned person like Talha. Zubair, related to the Prophet, the husband of Asma, the sister of Aisha. For these people to pledge allegiance to Imam Ali and then to break their allegiance because their shares, one of the reasons was that because their shares of the public treasury were denied to them by Imam Ali because he was an egalitarian, one who will behave in terms of equality and justice. You can see how much the souls had drifted from that beautiful, neutral pedestal at which the Prophet had placed them, in which they were God-centered, they were looking towards the hereafter, they were talking about refining their souls. These people had amassed so much wealth that their minds had been removed from God altogether. These were devastating 25 years. The policies enacted by Khalifa Umar, although he might have meant well, but there was no way he had that foresight as to how they would then unfold. The Diwan system set up by Khalifa Umar initially was good, that you favor the Quraysh, and then the Arabs, and then the non-Arab Muslims. But towards the time of Imam Ali, it had corrupted the people, and we read also accounts that Umar himself, Khalifa Umar himself, was regretful at this policy. But at the time of Imam Ali, when he tried to cancel this policy, the whole of the Quraysh, well, not whole of the Quraysh, but the leaders of Quraysh went against him. Now, these were the people, a lot of whom had seen the Prophet and had accompanied the Prophet. Where had their piety gone? This is what happens when we do not have righteous leadership within the folds of an Islamic community whose whole objective is to attain the pleasure of God and bring about a righteous, godly, human community on earth. When we don't have righteous leadership. So the first thing we see within the Khilafah of the Khulafa that preceded Imam Ali is that God was not a central component. God was reduced to ritual prayers, to Hajj, so on and so forth, to speech, speaking the Quran. But then this Quran was also used, and the hadith of the Prophet was used to kill Imam Hussein himself. This was how people were able to pervert the Quran of the Prophet. And it is no fault of the people because there was no guide after the Prophet. Now, that was the most vulnerable era for the community where they needed a righteous person, a person acquainted with the Quran, acquainted with the noble example of the Blessed Messenger, who in himself was God centered and who was uncorruptible. Now, I will say this much: Khalifa Abu Bakr and Khalifa Umar led austere lives. They were righteous in that sense, very, very righteous. They did not give positions to their children. They did not hoard wealth. They did not. This was a righteous example that they had set. But at the same time, what was missing was that strict sense of social justice, that strict sense of God consciousness. That was missing from them. When Imam Ali comes, Salamullah alayhi, look at the sermons that he gives. They are filled with a sense of accountability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are filled with the notion of what God is and the place that God should acquire within human life. This was exactly in keeping with the message of the Quran and the message of the Blessed Prophet. That went missing in the 25 years. And that caused such a drift away from that beautiful ideal that the Prophet had, that it was something that was not retrievable. I'm going to repeat again. In that khutbah of Shakshakiyah, Imam Ali said, now I find myself upon a camel that has become unruly. That camel is the Muslim community, that their minds have now drifted away from that righteous position where the Prophet had placed it. It has become like an unruly camel. If I were to pull hard upon the reins of the camel to slow it down, it will slit the nostrils of the camel and cause it to bleed to death. To say that the community has reached a point where you cannot bring it back to the right course. And if I were to let the reins of the camels loose, it will drag itself with its rider to its destruction. He's explaining his predicament, that look, I'm between these two. If I exert force, the force will kill them. If I let the reins loose, it will kill them. The Islam within Islamic community has all but gone. That's what he was saying. Now, this is not to say that the people were corrupt and the people were bad. No, people were good. As we mentioned yesterday, the people are good. Like today, majority of the Brexiteers are saying that it was a wrong decision. And if there are new referendums to come, the people are saying they will vote in great numbers to rejoin the European Union. You are seeing the people of America, the people of Britain, the people of Europe, by and large, vast majority of the people are against these wars that our countries are taking us to within the Middle East, in Africa, and other regions. Yet, our leaders are dragging us to these wars. What that does is it breeds discontentment within the people, and they become hopeless at the end of the day. Now, unless they awaken by some miraculous force, the status quo remains the same. Last 25 years, and I want to talk a little bit about this in the next khutbah. Last 25 years, imagine the amount of devastation we have wreaked upon the world. Imagine what we have done to the world. Our hands are dripping with blood due to what our governments are doing in our name. And the thing is, we are not left with any choice. You either elect a genocidal Sunak or an equal genocidal Keir Starmer. They will both kill the Palestinians. We know this. Did anybody have any doubt that both of them are equal when it comes to the foreign policy in supporting Israel? Nobody had any doubt, did we? I was so happy when Trump brought about the initial ceasefire, but we always knew that the situation is going to worsen, and we said this, that the situation is a temporary lull and the situation will worsen to an extent unimaginable. And I want to talk about that in a little while. What choice did people have, Biden or Trump? How can you say there is democracy? This is the state of the people. The same thing was with the initial Islamic community. The people don't have a say. The people are good, but their sentiments, their good intentions are diluted over time. They become frustrated. God is lost. It's the same situation that was there prior to the coming of the Prophet. The people were not bad. There were few warlords who exploited the situation, placed people into idolatry. A lot of the people had awoken, but they couldn't do anything about it. And gradually and slowly they were drifting away. This is the same thing we find after the demise of the Prophet, that the Khulafa might have intended well, but the community was drifting away because they were not the right people to lead a godly community. They did not understand what godliness meant. They did not understand the message of the Quran or the spiritual example and the moral example of the Blessed Prophet. For them, expand the Muslim Ummah, make it affluent, keep its unity, although that unity was an arbitrary unity based on worldly gains is not a real unity. But all the while, internally, corruption was spreading to the extent that you can imagine that Imam Ali comes to the seat of Khilafah and the wife of our blessed Prophet, Bibi Aisha, allows herself to wage a war against Ali. How can anybody digest this? Of all the people in the world, she should have been the person most acquainted with the Prophet's method, with the Quran. Shouldn't she? She's our mother. She is our mother. We expect her to lead us righteously. In any case, she was deterred from going to battle with Imam Ali at some point. But then, of course, she was convinced otherwise. Then she regretted afterwards. But when Imam Ali told her, you do not know what you are doing. And Talha and Zubair, such noble people, grand companions, first of the Muslims, defenders of the Prophet, fought in battles. These people who had given up their discretion to Allah are now siding with Bibi Aisha after pledging allegiance to Imam Ali. You can imagine how the situation had turned. Imam Ali said to Bibi Aisha, you really don't know what you're doing. And guess what? You see, the first three Khalifas were good people, I will say. Although Khalifa Uthman was very naive, he was nepotistic, he had that weakness, and he allowed the situation to get out of control, which eventually led to his death. But what these three did not know was the consequence of what they were doing. And Imam Ali immediately said to Aisha, Bibi Aisha, you don't know the consequence of what you're doing because there is a very pharaonic person out there who is ready to convert a divine religion into a monarchy, and that is Muawiyah. And who benefits from all of this? The first two Khalifas came, they sacrificed and they gave everything. The third one was aristocratic by nature, but good-hearted and compiled the Quran, which was the biggest favor he has done for us and for the Muslim community, no doubt. But he was open to manipulation. But guess what their actions led to? They led to a demon like Muawiyah coming to the fore. And that was the end of Islam as we know it. You're talking about media today, how media distorts facts. Muawiyah. That was Muawiyah in practice back then. You're talking about government carried out and sponsored terrorism. Muawiyah again. You're talking about assassinations. Muawiyah again. Read the history of this man. He is not a good person. Now I'm going to say the mistakes that were made by the Khulafa in their naivety. Now these are reports, of course, and you get conflicting reports and you get analysis and you get revisionists coming afterwards and revising history and so on and so forth. But from what we have right now, I think Khalifa Umar was very astute and he knew what was happening and what wasn't happening. There are two things I want to point out here. At his deathbed, when he was setting up a council, I do not see that emphasis on godliness, righteousness, justice. I don't see that in his last words. There might have been some, but not emphatic enough. The final sermon of the Prophet at Ghadir Khum. Study that sermon. It was God-centered. Put God at the helm of your lives and at the helm of the community. Of course, we don't find anything from the Khalifa Abu Bakr of the same, in the same tone, or from Khalifa Umar or Khalifa Uthman. In any case, Umar, for the concern of the community, appointed a council in which he is reported to have remarked that Ali would be the best candidate, but people would not be able to withstand his sense of justice and strict righteousness in his disciplined manner. On the other hand, Osman, with his family ties and his great wealth, would be good for the community, but Khalifa Umar said, I'm fearful that he will allow the Bani Umayyah, he will reign in the Bani Umayyah, and then it will become not a Muslim ummah, but maybe it might lean towards a dynasty, a kingdom. Now I'll say to Khalifa Umar, why didn't you remove Muawiyah when you knew he was bad? Why didn't you just trust in Allah and place Imam Ali after you? Now this was the concern that Khalifa Abu Bakr and Khalifa Umar showed initially at the demise of the Prophet, that Imam Ali has many enemies because he has killed many of the Quraysh and the Quraysh don't like him. Well, I'll say to the Khulafa, now in hindsight, by not appointing, by not using your office and your influence to stabilize Ali Salamullah alayhi, look at what happened to Islam. Look at what happened to Islam. Look at how we are suffering now. Sectarianism from Muawiyah onwards. It's plaguing us. Look at what you did. The naivety of Bibi Aisha in causing the first civil war. Muawiyah uses the opportunity that weakened the forces of Islam at that point after that battle, the year of fitna, the great fitna that Islam saw. The naivety of the Kharijis they were just like the Muslims we see today, many of them, that we will be ruled by the book of God. What does the book of God say? And then when the book of God says something, then they want to go against it. There was no righteous nurturing. What did you three do? You meant well, but look at where you brought the community. You handed it over to Muawiyah. It would have been better had the Khulafa used their office and their influence to stabilize Imam Ali. 30 years, no doubt, there would have been strife. I'm sure of that. People did not like Imam Ali. A lot of them did not like Imam Ali. There's no doubt there would have been strife. There's no doubt there would have been sects, but not to this state. We would not have had sectarianism and the plague that was unleashed by the first civil war conducted by Bibi Aisha and fully taken advantage of by Muawiyah. We would not have had this situation. Those 30 years at least would have set an example, cemented that this is what a godly community ought to look like. These are the principles of justice. This is the sense of righteousness, not wavering, not compromising. And I want to talk about the Muslim communities today, but which of our Muslim communities and countries are following the noble example of the Prophet or Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayh? I'm going to finish on this note, and my time has gone, that I do believe that Imam Ali was no ordinary man, although I reject the extremist Shia claims that he was next to God and God-like in the way that they mention. But I equally reject the modernists who say that he was nothing more than just a righteous scholar. Study his life, you know. With full conviction, you will come to this conclusion that this man is a divine man, as divine as a human being can become. A saintly figure. And I will say this, that he is cut from the same cloth as the Prophet was, the same prophetic substance this man has in him. There is no doubt, there is no doubt. This man is something grand, grand, grand. You will not find his equal after the Prophet. And humanity will celebrate him till the end of its journey on this earth. I just hope there comes a time where the name of Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayh adorns the human horizons alongside the name of Prophet Muhammad, Isa, Musa, Ibrahim, alongside other great leaders like the Buddha. I hope a time comes where everybody can see that this man is cut above the rest. He is as sacred as sacredness can get. He is no less than anyone else who has preceded him in history of those divine figures. It's a great shame. It's a great shame what the Ummah has done to itself by rejecting Imam Ali. And it's a great shame that the Muslims are unable to even now objectively study him and to see what he really was. In every aspect of this man's life, you find nothing but godliness and righteousness and bravery. I'm going to leave us with that epic statement of Imam Ali, in which he has reported to have said, just read his Najul Balagha in his statements and don't worry about what people are saying about authenticity and inauthenticity. You will know. When you read those words, those that are Ali's words, you will know these are Ali's words. He said, if I were to be given 7 heavens with all its treasures, and if I were to be asked to extract a husk of barley seed from the mouth of an ant unjustly, I would not do so. There you go. Where will you find a man like that? Can we recite the Surah Fatiha for all our marhumeen, for the people of Palestine and elsewhere who are subjected to oppression and tyranny, and for all humanity at large, our deceased. Al-Fatiha. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطيبين الطاهرين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Just a few things. I used to pride myself over being British. That this is a country in which you have freedom to practice your religion, but more than that, you have freedom of expression and freedom of speech, only to find now that engaging in free speech may cost you your freedom altogether. This is where the situation has come to. It's quite unfortunate. Now we find these reports that Iran is being threatened with a war. Now, when you look at the analysts, the Americans, and these are minds, subhanAllah, brilliant minds who are geopolitical analysts, and you look at mere these professors that come on different, like Defending Freedom and other sort of YouTube channels where they are interviewed. Mir Shaimer, I think, he said, look, Houthis and Hezbollah, shouldn't they be commended for defending the rights of the Palestinians when none of the other Arab countries defended them? And the West was supporting Israel in its campaign of slaughter and genocide, or plausible genocide, and ethnic cleansing. Shouldn't they be praised? And then low-key again, last night I was watching an interview with Denny Haifong on his show, when he said, what has Iran done anyway that is so wrong? Iran has supported Palestine. What has Iran gained? What gain has Iran had in this? And then you find other analysts saying, has Iran attacked any country? Have they gone and assassinated anybody on their own soil? Have they instigated terrorism in the world? He said Iran has not done any of these things to the best of our knowledge. Why are we so adamantly against Iran? They were ready to sign a nuclear deal, which they did with Obama, non-proliferation. Sorry, it's fast. And Trump comes and tears it up. What wrong have they done? They're saying, look, Netanyahu is taking America to needless wars where America is not threatened by these countries at all. Why should we participate in these wars? And now we are seeing a war being spoken of, looming against Iran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save the people of Iran from a war. They don't need it, and they are innocent people and they haven't done anything. And if we look at the analysts, they are saying, what wrong has Iran done to America in any way, and how does Iran constitute a threat to America? Look, I have not supported any regime in any country, Muslim or non-Muslim country. I have not supporting any regime. My heart has always been for the people, because I do feel the regimes are not godly. And I'm always critical of regimes. But what wrong have the people of Iran done? You see, Saddam was bad. He was a tyrant. I don't know how many of you young ones here remember those days. You were at the mosque, I remember. I don't know if you remember the speeches that we used to give there. I'm not saying, it's not a royal we, by the way. It's me and other people. Do you remember how adamantly opposed we were for America and Britain to go to war with Iraq? Do you remember that? Do you remember how many of us marched in London against the war when Tony Blair was taking us there? Do you remember this? So the older ones will remember. We took over 10 coaches. Do you remember? And we protested. You are all very young, but you were there. It is not that we loved Saddam. We knew that what will replace Saddam will be far worse than Saddam, and it actually happened in that way. Look at the turmoil in Iraq. Its revenues and oil revenues are all being taken away. It's become unstable. It will take years for Iraq to stand on its own feet. There is nothing but corruption within the political system of Iraq. And then what? Sunni, Shia, sectarian tension. And then what? ISIS. Think what they did to Iraq, or what we did to Iraq. Saddam was better than what we gave Iraq. Similarly with Jolani. We know for a fact that Assad might be a tyrant, might be whatever he is. But when we, the West, go for regime change, it will be far worse than what they had already. It will destabilize the whole region. As a result, Israel took more land, incapacitated Israel, and the Palestinians are left without a shield that was Syria at one point. And what did the Muslims do? You know, I used to trust Jazeera, but the way in which they were trying to give Jolani a good public image said it all, where their loyalties are. It's such a shame. If this is not Muawiyah trait operational within East and West, then what is it? Look at the Arab states. Which of them came to the assistance of the Palestinian people? Which of our Western countries came to the assistance of the Palestinian people? Our hearts are with the Palestinians. Our hearts are with the Lebanese people. Our hearts are with the Iranian people. Our hearts are with the Iraqi people. Yet the states are leading us into ungodly actions. I just hope Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects the people of Iran. Ameen. But the only way to stop what is happening right now, I don't see the heads of states will do it. I think it will be the people of the countries. Unless the people within the East and the West stand and they say we want no more wars, they will drag us to wars. Now I do know that according to our eschatological literature, things are set to worsen and get far worse than what they are already. And we are seeing this progressively. And maybe this is that time that the hadith have spoken of, and collectively within the Abrahamic faiths. But it is our human duty to speak about this wrong. And it is our human obligation from Allah and divine imperative, that we do whatever is within our means in accordance with the laws of our country to stop this. And I hope humanity at large will try, at least we can die trying. And I leave us with this final message, that after the collapse of humanity is always a reset of humanity. So let us be filled with confidence and look towards that future and work towards rebuilding the community from within, even though externally it might be led to its own destruction. May Allah bless the people of our world, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala safeguard the lives and properties and the dignity of our world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل وسلم على محمد المصطفى وعلى علي المرتضى وعلى فاطمة الزهراء وعلى الحسن المجتبى والحسين الشهيد بكربلاء وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي وحجة الله بن الحسن القائم المهد المنتظر. اللهم عجل فرجه وسهل مخرجه واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.